Ivan the Terrible has staked a claim as one of the most ferocious dictators in all history. He is remembered in infamy for his apparent love of violence and his depraved practices. The first Tsar of Russia, Ivan instituted a reign of terror that would create an empire and establish a legacy of fear. Ivan was born on August 25th, 1530, the son of Grand Prince Vasily III of Moscow. He inherited the throne at just 3 years of age when his father died. For the next 5 years, his mother, Yelena Glinskaya, ruled in his name. In 1538, she died, possibly by poison. Over the next 9 years, a fierce struggle ensued between various factions vying for power. Ivan learned early on that in order to survive, he needed to be vicious and calculating. Russia's hereditary nobles, the Boyars, sought power at any expense. These ones plotted and schemed to attain positions for themselves, while disdaining the common people. Ivan very quickly came to despise them. Ivan was crowned Tsar in 1547 at the age of 16. He had grown into a sensitive, alcoholic teenager who had already become desensitized to seeing his political enemies violently done away with. Later in 1547, he married Anastasia Romonovna, an ancestor of the Romanov Dynasty that would later dominate the Russian Empire. Since the age of 12, Ivan had been instructed and influenced by a well-known cleric, writer, and painter by the name of Makiri. This man served as the spiritual head of the Russian Orthodox Church, and he persuaded the young Tsar to establish a Christian state. In following through on this guidance, Ivan's government brought in a number of central and local reforms. Church councils strengthened the role of the church in state affairs. In 1550, Ivan's government brought in a new legal system to replace the one that had been in place for the previous half a century. The reforms that Ivan introduced in the early years of his rule unified the nation, reorganized and strengthened the armed forces, and allowed for self-government in the regions. From the moment he assumed power, Ivan sought to limit the power of the Boyars, who owned great tracts of land that they acquired by hereditary possession. Ivan was determined to strip them of their power, while promoting those of the service gentry class. These were men who had been awarded land grants in recognition of their service to the state. This made them beholden to Ivan himself as the one who gave and could therefore take away their wealth. From the beginning of his reign, Ivan evidenced a mean streak that displayed itself in violence. However, his wife Anastasia served to suppress his natural instincts for the first 13 years of his rule. When she died in 1560, shortly to be followed by the cleric Makiri, the restraints were unleashed. In 1564, Ivan created Russia's first secret police force, known as the oprichniki. These were dressed fully in black and sworn to protect the Tsar. Ivan used the oprichniki to torture, terrorize, and kill anyone who he saw as a potential threat. Often, those who thought themselves to be close associates of the Tsar were dragged off by the secret police and tortured to death. Rather than being a hands-off despot, Ivan loved nothing better than to take a leading hand in the torment. The more violent and depraved the torture, the better it was for him. Victims were often boiled or skinned alive, impaled, blown upon barrels of gunpowder, drowned, or beaten to death. Ivan carried with him a metal-tipped staff, which he would often wield in fits of rage. In 1581, he actually beat his son, Ivan, to death with this staff in a violent rage. Throughout Ivan's reign, Russia was constantly at war. The country was surrounded by enemies, including the Tatars and the Livonians to the west. Between 1547 and 1550, Ivan ordered campaigns against Kazan, the capital of the Tatarstan Republic, located on the Volga River. These were unsuccessful, and in 1547, Ivan personally led a campaign that routed and conquered Kazan. 2 years later, Russia managed to annex the city of Astrakhan at the mouth of the Volga River. With this possession, Russia claimed dominion over the Volga River. Control of the Volga gave Ivan the impetus to press for a direct route to the sea, to open up what was, until then, a landlocked Russia. He knew that the ability to access the Baltic would open up trade with Europe, which would transform his nation. To achieve this goal, Ivan declared war on Livonia, on the eastern coast of the Baltic, in 1558. The campaign was initially successful. However, the Livonians joined forces with Poland. Sweden then joined in the war against Russia. As this war dragged on, Crimean Tatars made an attack up the Volga in 1571. They reached all the way to Moscow, burning it to the ground. It is estimated that between 10,000 and 70,000 people died in the conflagration. Ivan managed to flee to Novgorod along the Volkhov River. The lack of progress in the Livonian War was a source of great frustration for Ivan. This frustration fueled his despotic nature. He saw conspiracies and treason everywhere, especially among the despised boyar class. By the mid-1560s, he had almost completely cut himself off from the outside, existing within an inner sanctum that was fiercely protected by his personal bodyguard. Ivan's final decade was marked by instability, withdrawal, and irrationality. During the 1570s, he married 5 women. In his later years, Ivan appears to have been plagued by guilt over his decades of torture and murder. He spent long hours in repentant prayer, inflicting self-harm as punishment. He died from a stroke while playing a game of chess in 1584. Some historians believe he was poisoned with mercury by his close advisor. With Ivan having killed his first sons and heir, Ivan II, 3 years earlier, the throne was passed on to his middle son, Fyodor. Prior to his death, Ivan was rechristened as a monk by the name of Jonah. He was buried in his monk's habit. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. If you have any other suggestions for future topics you'd like us to cover, please leave a comment below. And we'll see you next time on History Junkie.